Welcome to the President's Forum podcast, where we explore innovation in higher education. September's a big month for the forum. We're spending a lot of our time and our energy exploring the best advice from our presidents to an incoming administration with regard to how to advance higher education in America. So today's guest will be Lisa Vollendorf. Lisa is the president of SUNY Empire State University in New York. Lisa, I understand that you're an avid hiker and traveler. So I want to know, have you ever combined those two passions? Have you ever traveled for a specific hike?
Wow, that's a great leading question. Thanks for asking. I did a mini trip, a 2-hour trip north from Saratoga Springs just this last weekend, and we went up to Lake Placid because I wanted to get up on top of Whiteface, see what it looks like. I'm also a skier, so we did actually specifically go to look at Whiteface, get to the peak, and we hiked all the way down, and I'm not going to lie, I could barely walk home yesterday.
Yeah, I get that.
Yes, I love hiking. I love the outdoors, and I love seeing new things. So combining all of those things is probably how I plan most of my travel.
Did you pick skiing up in Colorado? Did I read? I mean, you
Yes.
have Colorado roots, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in Breckenridge, Colorado, and I, from the age of 4, was a skier. I am not a good skier. I didn't ski for 20 years when I was an adult, so don't get the wrong idea. But yeah, we used to, back in the day, we were able to take the school bus from kindergarten when we got out at midday over to the base of Peak 9, and we would ski for the rest of the day on runs that there is no way you could pay me to ski now because it would be completely unsafe in my middle age.
Nice. That's a good childhood right there.
It was pretty good. Being
able to ski on a regular basis. Anytime school has, the scheduled opportunities to ski, you're at a pretty fun school.
Yeah, we did actually have scheduled opportunities to ski for 8 weeks a year all through elementary school. So that's a true story. We got out at midday and you could ski, skate, or cross-country ski. So obviously I skied.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people cross-country ski, but it would be a hard decision for me to pass up a lift for doing all the work on the way up. So
and when you're 8 years old, pretty much the lift is the way to go, I think.
Right. I agree. Well, okay. Tell us a little bit about, I just want our listeners to get more familiar with Empire State University. Tell us a little bit about what makes Empire unique.
So Empire State University was founded in 1971, really after all of the State University of New York was created. So the community college, comprehensive 4 years, the university centers, all of it was built. And to the credit of the folks in the room at the time, they knew that something was missing. So Empire was created to be the distance education arm, the innovation arm, really, of SUNY. So fast forward to 2024, and we are New York's first and only public online university, and we now serve upwards of 16,500 students, and we're growing.
Great. Well, I know that a lot of states have had problems developing their own part of the system, online, innovative, distance, access-oriented institutions. So it's kind of interesting that New York's managed to do this, and you actually are now in your growth mode.
Yeah, and we have been growing for many years. Like most people, most institutions, we grew a lot in the teens, the 2012, 13, 14, 15, like everybody else. And we did have some contraction. And when COVID hit...
Like everybody else.
And when COVID hit, unlike everyone else except our President's Forum colleague institutions, we were well prepared already 2 to 3 decades into leaning into online learning.
Right.
So we didn't miss a beat at Empire, and we have just been growing leaps and bounds since then. And I want to pick up on what you said about access. We were created to be the access arm of the State University of New York, and that is very much not just part and parcel, but very much baked into how we operate, how we do our business. And really our ethos at Empire is about access, affordability, meet students where they are, serve learners of all ages, all the things that we now hear people talking about nationwide with regard to serving adult learners or so-called non-traditional learners.
Right.
You will never hear me say non-traditional because traditionally our learners do indeed span all the generations.
Right. Well, okay. So you mentioned during COVID, you didn't skip a beat, right? I've described that to other people as our institutions were always swimming against a higher ed current, because the current always favored seat time in person. It didn't necessarily, it hadn't worked out the kinks of access and access oriented institutions. And it was always about exclusivity and, the most, the highest degree of respect you could get in higher ed was always, well, how many people do you say no to that apply to
Yes.
your institution, right? And we're kind of in this new era. You take COVID and you change the current a little bit, and now all of a sudden our institutions are swimming with the current in a lot of ways, but especially with regard to access. So today and this month, we're asking our presidents, the presidents of some of the most innovative institutions of higher ed in America, we're asking them for counsel, advice that they would give to an incoming administration, whether it be a Trump administration or a Harris administration. What have you learned, over the past decade, and what do you think that a new Department of Education administration should be looking at and thinking about as they make this? I mean, we're going to see a transition in January, so what's your advice for those leaders who will be on the front lines of higher education come January?
My learning at Empire State University has been very profound because formerly, my whole rest of my career, I worked at traditional 4-year residential campuses. And I came across the country from California to New York State for the promise and the potential of SUNY Empire. And what I have learned is that our entire incentive structure is backwards. Our incentive structure in higher education is institution specific. It's competitive in nature, to your point about we're proud when we say we have a low acceptance rate.
Right.
I would not like to be at an institution with a low acceptance rate. I am proud to work at an institution where we are working to speed time of application to enrollment, where we're working to holistically support learners of all ages. We serve students age 15 to 88 currently in this current term. And those are brand new students. The 15-year-old and the 88-year-old are brand new this term. We have to think differently about how we incentivize our colleges and universities in this country. And the Department of Education has such an incredible opportunity in 2025 to really look at what the incentive structures are. The Pell program is created for 4-year traditional institutions. You term out of Pell after 12 terms of using that aid. That is
Right.
not effective for people who take classes along the way and are encouraged, as they should be, to use their Pell
Right.
without a clear pathway to a degree. So our students at Empire show up having burned through, on average, 30% of their federal financial aid. They don't understand that they only get 12 terms of Pell. People think it's a bank account. It's not.
Right.
It's up to a certain amount over a certain amount of terms. And that is confusing. It's frankly a very opaque system. I think Pell needs to be changed if we're going to lean into degree completion, which is what else I would beg of the Department of Education, to help us help the 40.4 million people in the country with some college, no credential, complete. And we need the help
Love that.
of the feds to do that work. We need a Pell completion program to help with degree completion. That's within the realm of the possible. But we need people to think bigger, I would say, and think in terms of the majority of the college population in the country. It is not 18 to 22-year-olds anymore. And that was a very small population to begin with. So as we drive degree completion, we're driving toward equity, we're driving toward diversification across the entire sector of higher ed. And we also need to be driving toward reconfiguring IPEDS. iPads, the data collection system is all about traditional four-year campuses, first-time, full-time students coming in. How long do they take to graduate, or how are we retaining them? We need to be thinking about new data collection around transferability. We need data collection that's collaborative. Who are your community colleges who do a good job with throughput and getting students to 4 years? Which are the four-year schools that have full transferability and welcome transfer students? Because I guarantee you the number of schools that actually do that work is very small, and
Right.
that's the work of the future. The work of the past was first-time, full-time students, 4 years, for an elite group of people. I
So
have a lot of other ideas, but there you go. Those are some of mine.
I love these ideas. A couple themes that I'm hearing. One is you mentioned we have to have we've had incentives that are leading us to the wrong accomplishments. So
Yes.
we need to look at the things we value the most and incent those things. And the other thing I'm hearing is we have been focused on an 18 to 22-year-old for too long. Those who are on campus, they have a meal plan, they are
Yes.
what people envision as a prototypical college student, and that is no longer prototypical. I mean, we
No.
have we have working learners that are we have to start creating education policy to accommodate working learners at this point. Okay, so with those two things, help me dial in a little bit on what are the incentives, what are the outcomes that we should be incentivizing in higher education? What should the department say? If we're going to talk about quality of a higher ed institution, this is the thing that is a hallmark indicator of quality. What is that?
For me, quality in the 21st century in higher education hinges on your ability to successfully serve a diverse student population. So, having all A students come in a narrow band, let's say, of student demographics, and have them complete in 4 years with straight A's. There are schools that are going to do that work. That's what they were created to do, and power to them. But the super majority of students are enrolled at community colleges, at four-year institutions, serving a very diverse student population. And we need the incentives to align with the reality that many, many people cannot go full time, and we need to accommodate that reality rather than keeping on trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Right.
I would love for educational opportunity programs to be thinking about part-time students and not just I would love for educational opportunity programs to really be reconfigured for all people, not just for a very
Right.
narrow band of students who have never taken class before and have to come full time.
You
I
know,
would love for us, go ahead.
one of the conversations I had on this topic was with David Andrews at UMass Global, and David, he mentioned what I'd love to see is a department that values the amount of lift between,
I love that. Lift.
the students who come in, and then when they leave. And his point is when you're a lead already and you give a tiny bit of lift, that's not as impressive as
Yeah.
when you have a diverse student body that comes in from all different walks of life, and you can lift all of them significantly from education. And I thought that was a good way to think about outcome based incentives.
I like that. I mean, California has that a little bit with the community college funding formula that changed about 7 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, 5 to 7 years ago. To be, if we start to look at the student population that we want to be served, as opposed to the student population that traditionally has been served,
Right.
that would be a good starting point.
Right.
If we want our higher education system to be in service to equity and access and opportunity, then those values need to drive the incentives. And the incentives, again, right now, are exclusive to single institutions. There's nothing collaborative. There is nothing that incentivizes us unless it's corporate private foundations, frankly.
Right.
Nothing incentivizes us to talk to each other about how to better serve a student population. And nothing is more possible than doing this work in an online, high quality environment, because we have the ability for students to be mobile in a ways that residential campuses simply can't accommodate anymore.
Well, you mentioned, earlier in the conversation, transferability and credit for prior learning. And those things are, in our current system, the truth is a lot of institutions get compensated for redundancy. I mean,
Yes.
if you can keep a student in the system longer, you will make more money from one student. And there's a financial incentive. Whether I don't actually believe that there are many institutions that are, attempting to keep students in longer and not get degrees, et cetera. But it's just this unconscious bias that exists in higher education that we get compensated when students are around and they're engaged for a longer period of time. Now, transferability and credit for prior learning, if you can provide those, you're actually hurting your own financial model in higher education today, right? You're saying we're going to get these students out faster. But, at the President's Forum, one of the things we emphasize is it's all about the student. It's not about the institution. So prioritizing institutional revenue above student outcomes and earnings is like, that's an awful thing to do. So I want to pick your brain a little bit about transferability. What should be happening in higher ed with regard to transferability and credit for prior learning?
Well, I have two words for you: full transferability. These are words that need to be stated together more often, and they need to be part of the common parlance of higher education, and they are not. Every system in the country, I hazard to guess, because I'm thinking of many, many that I'm aware of, and I know this to be a fact, has had or has currently undertaken an initiative toward how to improve transferability. And I have served on such task forces before
Right.
in two states, and I have two words for those meetings: full transferability. There is no excuse for us, particularly when you're talking about public systems within the same state, sister campuses with the same funding source, the same mission, the same values purportedly. When we don't embrace full transferability as a starting point, we are in fact endorsing the old way of being elitist in higher education. It's a
Yep.
very exclusionary way of being that we have to reject. And we have to be able to show that the outcomes are quality outcomes. So at Empire, again, as with many of my colleagues across the President's Forum, we embrace full transferability. We do it to an extent that I had never seen before I joined this institution. We take up to 93 credits. We give
Nice.
credit for prior learning, and we have been doing that for 5 decades since our inception. So we have a deeply ingrained ethos around we truly meet the students where they are, and we learn from them not just what's on the transcript, but what experience they have in life, where they want to go, and we match that then with their degree pathway. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do this work and to scale this work. It seems very individualized, but the fact is we're doing it with 16,500 students right now, and it can be done with many more if you have the systems in place to have robust financial aid, robust registrar,
Right.
robust advising, and really if you're hiring people who believe that that is what we should be doing in higher ed.
I love I love the leadership here on full transferability. And you've pointed out something that's very true, and that is within a state system, there's no excuse for not having full transferability other than elitism. Like that's the only excuse. Like, nope, that credit won't work for our institution. We have a better institution. And we have got to get over that way of thinking. And we have to have full transferability, especially within state systems. But I want to expand it. We live in an incredible time, and barriers to travel are much lower than they've been. Our communication ability is so much higher than it's ever been. Why don't we make those same that same expectation of within a state system to every higher ed institution in America ought to have full transferability, and that's where we should go. It's crazy to me that we have so much lost credit, and it hampers the people it hurts the most are the people who need the most help. So
Absolutely.
so that's a question that I've always had. Why can't we get to that point? Let's get ambitious. Let's get crazy at the department. Let's get crazy in higher ed and figure that one out. But it also leads me to this: state reciprocity and SARA issues. State boundaries being kind of an artificial boundary. Tell me about what SARA means to your institution, and tell me where you think we should be going with state reciprocity in the future.
Well, there is nothing more important than protecting and maintaining state reciprocity if we believe that higher education needs to improve and needs to serve and can serve more people nationwide. Period. Full stop. SARA enables us and online institutions to serve students regardless of where they physically reside. And I will give the example of SUNY Empire. There's 64 SUNY institutions. We serve more military and veteran students than any other SUNY
Oh,
currently.
wow.
And this is a long-standing point of pride for us. And
Right.
we want to serve more military affiliated and veteran students. This is a population we're passionate about. It's a population that is mobile, and it is mobile many times for reasons that are beyond individuals or families'
Right.
control, of course. So if we are going to roll back state reciprocity, we as a nation or we as a Department of Education are implicitly going to be declaring that veteran and military students do not have the right to get an online education or to get a college degree in a timely fashion while they're serving the country. That is an unacceptable starting point. I think most people would agree, but is probably the most poignant and specific example I can think of how state reciprocity is in service to access, and it's in service to access to populations of individuals who otherwise have no option.
Right. I mean, this issue, it seems like we have a conversation in the regulatory world about reciprocity issues every couple of years. And I think that we need to come to a resolution, a longer term resolution than just bringing it up every couple of years. So this kind of input and leadership from the President's Forum, I think, will be key as we move forward on reciprocity issues. And it's good to see, institutions that have really benefited from it in serving unique populations like the military. So I know that we have several of our institutions who have voiced
Yes,
that exact same, use case that you've just provided is, if we don't do this, how are we going to serve our veterans? How are we going to serve our active duty military? They're all over the world, frankly,
they're all
not
over
just
the world.
right.
And one other population that comes to mind here in New York State that is a very important population for us in the state and for us at Empire State University is the Puerto Rican population. There's also a Dominican population that is smaller, but no less important in the state of New York. These are populations that go back and forth, but Puerto Rico in
Right.
particular, there are 1 million Puerto Ricans in the state of New York,
Wow.
and Puerto Ricans often come and go, and they come and go because they have two homes. They have New York City and they have their home island. And there is something to be said for thinking more broadly about the full population and thinking about people being able to enroll in college and stay enrolled and move toward a degree without having to continually stop out because of arbitrary rules and rules that if reciprocity were taken away, our ability to really be in service to these populations and many more I'm probably not even thinking of would completely vanish overnight.
Right. So Lisa, we've had a pretty wide-ranging conversation. I want you to boil it down after that conversation. The top priorities for an incoming administration with regard to higher ed, if they could take away from this conversation a thing, one or two things, what would you say those one or two things would be?
I would say, future Department of Higher Education, please help us help learners of all ages enroll in school, stay in school, and complete the degree that they want to complete. It is the online institutions in this country that are best positioned to deliver high quality, accessible, affordable education across state lines. And we need help not just in protecting state reciprocity, but we also need your help in really rethinking Pell eligibility in terms of the 12-term eligibility. We need your help in thinking about a Pell completion program. I would love to have a conversation and see a really rigorous conversation about how we can incentivize collaboration across institutions, including, for example, cross-institutional retention data. If we can help a student who needs to be online for one term, who's a community college student, otherwise in person, stay in school, SUNY Empire wants to play that role because our goal is not to grow our own student population necessarily. Our goal is to be in service to access, retention, and completion nationwide.
So if I were to make the recommendation to if I were to summarize this and say to the department, we need a bigger, better, more laser-like focus on working learners and the diverse nature of working learners within the regulatory mechanisms. Would that go toward what you're saying of creating opportunities for all if there was a laser-like focus on working learners and regulation?
Well, it's interesting. I noticed that you say working learners a lot and that President's Forum has embraced that language. We took a deep look at what that means to say working learners and decided that we are in service to learners of all ages. We are an autism supportive institution by designation, and we're very proud of that.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
so, just to push a little bit on, we need higher education to be supported to be able to serve a diverse student population, regardless of age, regardless of station, regardless of race and ethnicity, regardless of working status or caretaker status, for example. So I would really push on, we need
Yeah.
support to be able to think about serving the 15-year-old all the way to the 88-year-old with integrity and with incentives that are built in that are focused on student success and not institutional success.
I like that that definition, that broader definition, because I mean we use the term working learners to encompass a huge variety
Yes,
of different learners, but it goes beyond working,
yes,
right?
it
I mean,
does.
if you're looking at autism and
Mhm.
you're looking you're looking at a 15-year-old, that's a lot different than a working 40-year-old who's coming back. So yeah, I can understand your desire to even broaden that.
May as well. All humans welcome in
Yeah,
higher education. That's what I like to say.
I get it. I get
And
it.
we're proud to serve all humans at Empire. And I know that my colleagues across the President's Forum we're always looking to be less exclusionary, more welcoming, and always leaning into quality and accountability. And this is what we do, and it's what we do well. And I would love for a new Department of Education to ask us, to ask the institutions that have been doing this heavy lift for so many years, what we need, because what we need is in service to a broader swath of the population than many other institutions currently are able to even lay claim to.
Right. Let's partner with regulators and let's figure out what the landscape needs to look like to promote success for all students. That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, we appreciate you joining the podcast. This has been really interesting. We'll get this out to our listeners. It'll be featured in our newsletter as well. but it's always great to have advice from people who are not only expert in administration in higher education, but who are seeing things that normal or that not all institutions of higher ed are seeing. I'll say.
Well,
I
thank
think it's a
you.
really interesting perspective, especially because you can contrast it. You've been at higher education institutions that don't serve the diverse student body that you currently serve. So it makes a big difference to see your perspective.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I feel so privileged to be here at Empire State University at this exciting time, and I'm hopeful that the Department of Education will be, in its new state, supportive of the kinds of initiatives and really will energize itself around the issues that we know to be important for the future of our country, not just our students.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for joining us, and I'm sure we'll find time to catch up again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Wes.